What's up, everybody? It's another day. It's another Wednesday, to be precise. And if you know anything about me, on Wednesday mornings I play basketball, and I'm not even trying to brag right now, but I was a solid 1 for 86 today. So that's like a 4% success rate. So I know you're jealous, but we're back in the book of Psalms today. I don't know. My Bible says Psalm. Some Bibles say Psalms, and other Bibles say Song of Psalms. Nah, I don't know about that last one actually. But anyhow, Psalms, whatever. Today we're going to be in chapters 6, 7, and 8. 6, 7, and 8 today. Three pretty short chapters, but we're going to get through those. And yeah, 6, 7, and 8 kind of talk to some kind of gritty, hard seasons of our lives. So maybe you have been in a season of your life where you're carrying more than you're letting other people see on the outside, or maybe you're carrying more than what you want to show to others or what you want to post on social media because everybody's perfect on social media, right? Yeah. But maybe you're in one of those seasons where even though you're showing up and doing what you got to do, you're handling your responsibilities, you're doing what needs to be done, something underneath you feels off in a way that just sleep or rest alone can't fix. And that's kind of where we start today in Psalm chapter 6. Verse 1 of Psalm chapter 6 says this: O Lord, don't rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your rage. So, what stands out immediately to me about this is that David is not trying to hide his struggle from God, or he's not avoiding God in the midst of his struggle, but instead he's running directly towards him and he's coming at it with complete honesty. David understands that God is holy and God is just, yet he still asks for mercy because he knows that his relationship with God allows room for both reverence and raw truth at the exact same time. And then you get into verses 2 and 3 that says this: Have compassion on me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. I am sick at heart. How long, O Lord, until you restore me? So, right away, you can kind of sense that this is not just a surface level stress that David is feeling, but something deep, something internal, an exhaustion almost that reaches both his body and his soul. And this kind of weight often shows up when everything else around us gets quiet and there's no distractions left behind to hide behind. Which is exactly the time, if I'm honest, you try to stay busy to avoid confronting what's actually going on the inside. I don't want to talk about my feelings. Gross. But David, he takes the opposite approach and he brings everything directly before God without filtering or pretending or hiding. Then in verse 4, he says, Return, O Lord, and rescue me. Save me because of your unfailing love. He's placing his trust entirely in God's character because of your unfailing love, which is a far more stable foundation than anything based on personal success or failure. So then, verses 6 and 7 say this: I am worn out from sobbing. All night I flood my bed with weeping, drenching it with tears. My vision is blurred by grief. My eyes are worn out because of all my enemies. Now, that's a level of honesty that I know challenges me, or challenges the idea that strength is found by suppressing our emotions, by keeping stuff internalized and not talking about them, trying to act like everything's okay when clearly it's not. What David demonstrates here is that real strength comes from bringing everything before God, bringing it into the light before God, rather than letting it harden your heart or harden inside you over time. And then chapter 6 closes by saying, Go away, all you who do evil, for the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea. The Lord will answer my prayer. May all my enemies be disgraced and terrified. May they suddenly turn back in shame. So even though nothing externally has changed in David's situation, something has shifted inside of him in a meaningful way. And that is what genuine prayer does. It realigns our perspective, it steadies our minds, and it does all of this even before our circumstances begin to improve. So that's important. But then we jump into chapter 7, and here the focus kind of shifts from the internal struggle to an external pressure that David is now dealing with. He's dealing with conflict, he's dealing with opposition, he's dealing with people coming against him. Verse 1 says, I come to you for protection, O Lord my God, save me from my persecutors, rescue me. So that reflects the reality of being misunderstood, accused, or attacked in ways that feel deeply personal. Instead of reacting impulsively, David shows restraint and clarity. In verses 3 and 4, it says this: O Lord my God, if I have done wrong, or I am guilty of injustice, if I have betrayed a friend or plundered my enemy without cause, then let my enemies capture me. And what David is doing here is he's revealing a willingness to invite God to examine his heart before asking for justice against others. That sort of posture requires humility, it requires confidence, because it means you're open to correction while still trusting God to defend what is right. And then in verse 9 it says, End the evil of those who are wicked and defend the righteous, for you look deep within the mind and heart, O righteous God. And so, what David is doing here is he's acknowledging that God looks deep within our hearts, and this shifts the focus from controlling our own outcomes or winning arguments toward trusting in a God who fully understands every single situation. Then in verse 10, it says, God is my shield, saving those whose hearts are true and right. David describing God as his shield sort of carries this image of active protection in the middle of a conflict rather than taking you out of the conflict, if that makes sense. So he doesn't remove the storm that you're going through, but he gives you the protection that you need to get through it. So a shield doesn't eliminate the battle going on around you, but it does mean that you're not as exposed as maybe you feel like in that moment. And then, as chapter 7 concludes, it says in verse 17, I will thank the Lord because he is just. I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. And I love this attitude from David because what makes it such a powerful statement is he's showing gratitude to God before a resolution to his problems or his situation becomes visible. And that kind of trust reflects discipline and maturity because it's rooted in who God is rather than how quickly our circumstances will change. And by the time you get to chapter 8, the tone sort of shifts again. It feels like David is stepping back to regain perspective by looking beyond his immediate situation. Verse 1 of chapter 8 says, O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is higher than the heavens. That statement sort of refocuses or recenters everything by focusing wholly on God's greatness instead of his own personal struggles. He reflects on the vastness of creation in verses 3 and 4, where he says, When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them. Now, that sort of brings, to me at least, a sense of humility. Like, man, I really am just the tiniest little speck in the vastness of God's creation, in the vastness of God's glory, but it also gives you a sense of wonder at the same time. Now, for David, he doesn't stay in that place of smallness. In verse 5, he says, Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. And that speaks directly to the value that God has for his children, that God has for humanity. He continues in verse 6 by saying, You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority. So when God created humanity, he gave them responsibility, he gave them authority, and he gave them purpose as part of their identity. And that's something that we should never forget. So, when you put these three chapters together and you blend them all up, the result of it is a clear progression that reflects real life for all of us. Psalm chapter 6 showed us what it looked like to bring our exhaustion, to bring our pain, to bring our situations honestly before God. Chapter 7 shows us how to handle conflict with integrity while trusting in God as our defender, as our shield. And then Psalm chapter 8 sort of restores perspective by reminding us that God's greatness and our identity are within his design and we were created for a purpose. And I think that knowledge of knowing that we were created for a purpose takes us from a place of pressure to a place of trust, a place of clarity, in ways that are practical and also deeply spiritual. And if you're honest about where you are right now, you'll probably find yourself somewhere in that progression of things, whether you're carrying quiet exhaustion, whether you're navigating any kind of tensions in relationships or anything like that, or maybe you just need a reset on how you see yourself and what your purpose is in God's will. God's invitation throughout all of this is a simple one. Although, admittedly, it's not an easy one because it requires intentional surrender on our parts. So we're called to be honest with God about what's really going on inside of us, about what's really going on beneath the surface. We need to release that need to try to control every outcome, release the need to defend ourselves in our own strength, and we need to allow God to reestablish our identities based on His truth rather than our circumstances or the situations that we might be facing. So, with all of that in mind, I only have one more thing to say. You know what it is. Won't he do it?